Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Connected by Community, brought to you by Ballantine Capital Advisors. I'm Brian Ballantine, and I'm here with Anthony Colincheco. And today we're excited to have joining us Mike Chibbaro from Battlefield Leadership. And I don't think I butchered that, so that's
right.
Did a good job.
Good. So welcome to the show, Mike. Glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
And we hope to talk about a lot of really cool stuff today. We kind of talked a little bit before we started rolling the cameras and the video. So, but before we jump into those things, tell those folks that don't know you, are you from the area? Are you married, kids, grandkids, all that kind of wonderful stuff?
Sure. Thank you. So yes, I'm unique in that I am from the area, born and raised in Greenville. Spent my entire career with Ernst Young, CPA firm, 31 years. A lot of that was in different roles that took me outside of Greenville, kind of traveled the country. But always the best part about travel was coming back home to Greenville, which I love. Wife and 3 boys, now got 5 grandkids, all local here. So very blessed by that. But I'll tell you, I retired early from my accounting career, got out while I still had some degree of sanity. And now my passion is really around leadership development. And that's how I joined up with a company called Battlefield Leadership, doing experiential leadership training, using the metaphor of history to do that.
That's kind of unique. So maybe tell us what that means and how does that look?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I got exposed to it while I was at Ernst Young. Obviously a very strong company in terms of investing in its people. So they had sent me to a lot of different training programs. They sent me to Harvard. They sent me to Kellogg. And quite frankly, a lot of those things, after a few days of sitting in a room, watching somebody flip through a PowerPoint and talk to you, you kind of, if you're like me and you have a little bit of ADD, you kind of lose interest. But then they sent me to Normandy with Battlefield Leadership. And what that was actually being outside on the ground with a couple of really great historians and a business facilitator to walk through the history of D-Day and then transfer leadership principles that came into play with the successful D-Day invasion to what I did every day at Ernst Young. Man, I was hooked. It was gold for me. And so when I retired from Ernst Young, the folks at Battlefield Leadership called me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in helping us do what we do?" And I said, "You mean you'll pay me to do that?" And so I hooked up with them. And I think the magic really is being on the ground, being aware these events happened. And so what it does for people is it etches in your mind forever, not just the history, but the leadership principle. And so when you leave there, like with any training, the danger of any training is you go back to the office and you have a binder you throw it on the shelf and you never think about it again. But man, when you have been to Gettysburg, when you have been to Normandy, been to Little Bighorn or one of these places, and you stood where the history happened, you never forget it. And it affects both your head and your heart. And so I think that's the power of it.
Really hands-on leadership.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's really what it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How many programs does Battlefield?
Yeah. Well, pre-COVID, we were doing over 100 a year, and mostly, corporate groups, executive groups, leadership groups. COVID obviously took a bite out of that because it suspended corporate travel, but coming back and doing a number now, hopefully do 30 or 40 this year as groups get back out and travel.
What are some of the more popular places you go to?
Yeah, so top of the list is going to be Gettysburg. It's an easy place to get to for travelers. And the thing about Civil War history, I don't know what it is, but the characters are so rich. Maybe it's the fact that when they sat around at night, they couldn't watch Netflix, so they journaled. And so we know a lot about them and we know a lot about the battles. So I'd say Gettysburg at the top of the list. And most Civil War battlefields, we do a program there. And I'll be at Antietam next week doing a program, Chickamauga and Chattanooga, Vicksburg, you name it. We could probably, we've done a program there. Second to that, probably and more difficult to get to would be Normandy, the D-Day. You gotta carve out the time to get there. But I think every American should get there and understand what that invasion did for the things that we get to enjoy today. And then I'd say probably third on the list of popularity might be Little Bighorn, Custer's Last Stand. It's not a great day in American history, but when you think about it from a corporate standpoint and you see the danger of complacency and how that creeps into leadership every day, thinking that you can never lose, and then you see what the Indians did to Custer, Little Bighorn, you never forget it. So those are probably top 3.
So you said mostly corporations. So is this just large corporations? Do some small companies do it? Could maybe even self-employed people say, I want to be better? Does schools do it? Maybe talk about who does these things and why.
Yeah, we've done the full gamut. We probably focus more on corporate leaders because it is an investment. But we've done everything from Fortune 5 companies. One of our largest clients is been a Fortune 5 company, all the way down to entrepreneurial type companies. And then every year we'll do a select number, what we call open enrollments. So if you're a small company and you've just got 2 or 3 people that want to go, you'll join up with other people there and do that. Done a few on the educational side, but mostly focused on the corporate setting because it is an investment. And I think that's where it really resonates with folks in terms of having an impact.
What would someone actually get out of that program?
Yeah. So we like to say what you're going to get is a life-changing experience. And I can honestly say that of all the programs I've ever been involved in, we've never had a dissatisfied customer. And I think the reason for that is so often in corporate settings, corporate leaders are so busy. They rarely take time to get off of the mountain they're climbing, to stop and reflect. So if you carve out 2 or 3 days to go to one of these sites, I think one of the great things they get a respite. They get time to step back and reflect. And then we provide a framework for them to think about themselves as a leader. So I think the number one thing that they get from our programs is they get the opportunity to become better leaders. They get the opportunity to become better at what they do, really reflect on that. And we give them a path forward for that. And then the other thing is they get inspired. When you go to Gettysburg and you talk about Joshua Chamberlain and you take them a little round top and you see this guy who was a college professor and what he does on that day to shape American history, you leave there and you say, man, I want to be more like that guy. And so you have personal inspiration.
So, and you said something about 2 or 3 days, or most of them 2 to 3 days? Yeah. Is that 2 to 3 days there plus travel? How does the timing work?
So a typical program would be a Monday through Wednesday or Wednesday through Friday if it was a U.S.-based program. Group would come into town on, say, a Monday afternoon. We'd have an opening time with them, kind of set the stage, give them a little bit of historical background, and then they have a nice dinner. And because the networking is as important too as they come together. Then you got a full day on the battlefield the next day, followed by we have an after-action review after every program. And then the final day would be a half day. And then we'll have a final after-action review where we're really trying to help them hone in on what it is they're going to take away and apply. So you're looking at, basically with travel, about a 3-day commitment, but actually on site, it's probably a total of about a couple of days.
And how many people are in these groups?
Yeah. So ideal size would be anywhere from 15 to 25. We've done groups as large as 60. We've done classroom programs with a few thousand in the room. But the ideal group, I think, from a dynamic standpoint, somewhere around 15 to 25. You get much bigger than that. People don't share because the real power of the program also is the interactive sharing that occurs. You take people to a setting and we use Socratic method. We're going to ask questions. We're going to get people to open up and talk about what they do in their work and how they can apply. And so as you basically have an open classroom on the battlefield and they're sharing. And so if you get too large a group, you take away some of that. And so
I was going to ask, do you see a lot of companies doing more team building in this program?
Absolutely. It's a great team building event. One of our larger companies uses it for team building. They also use it for what we call differential investments in high potentials. So if you got a group of high potential leaders and you want to do something really special for them, you'll send them to one of our programs. And even one client uses what they call a leadership journey. So they'll set up a succession of multiple programs where over the course of a year, they'll take them to Gettysburg. They'll take them a little Bighorn, and they might cap it off with a trip to Normandy or somewhere else. So, yeah.
So, and you shared a little bit about, how exciting it was for you and the things you learned. Mm-hmm. What are some of the feedback you hear from your clients that go there and some of the outcomes?
Yeah. Great question. So the feedback we generally hear, and I hate to toot our own horn, but what we typically get is most powerful leadership experience of my life. It's just a very emotive experience. And I think because it's so different. But I think beyond that, what I think people get and what we hear the most is I got something practically that I can use. So we will intersperse a lot of military leadership principles as well. Give you a simple example. We use something in the military uses called commander's intent, which is a technique that the military uses to explain purpose, method, end state. Well, in most corporations, breakdowns of mission usually falls because there's lack of clarity around commander's intent. So they leave with a practical tool that they can apply in their setting, and there are multiple ones like that. So the personal inspiration and the practical aspects of what they can get, I think, are the big things they take away.
You mentioned that Gettysburg was one of the most popular, and obviously Normandy for the obvious reasons that everyone should try to do. What's maybe a surprising one that people, wouldn't think, man, I should spend some time there reflecting, whether it's in this program or being there, but what's maybe a surprising place and one that people get unsurprised outcomes?
Yeah. Well, one that we've done that I think most people can relate to, it's hard for some people to go back and relate to Civil War. We do a program called Decisions of Consequence around the 9/11 memorial in New York City. So everybody that was alive during that time can connect to that one. And so leading in the midst of crisis and how all that impacted you, when we've done that, it was kind of a surprise how deeply that one connected with folks. But again, I think it's a function more of where people are in their leadership journey and the connection they have. But like I say, we've never had one where people walked away and said, that was a waste of my time.
Yeah. Well, I know with 9/11, having personally been to that, I'll speak, is we have someone on our team that just recently went to New York and I heard her talking about it. Because it is history. It's interesting. Some of our young folks, it had happened before they were born. We can personally relate to it. So it's not just reading a textbook. I remember where I was the day I was on the road and I turned over. I remember pulling over in a parking lot, hearing when the first plane hit and what happened. Those sites are really impactful, I think, when you've read about the history book. But boy, when you've read about it and you've seen it happen and heard it, the impact has to be great. So doing something like that has to have an extra sensory as a human that it's personal. Because if you live through 9/11 and you have an emotional bone in your body, you can't help but feel some pain and sorrow when you're at that hole in the ground.
Absolutely.
And so it's powerful.
The other thing, just to note, we do a fair number of programs in the classroom because we can't get everybody to the battlefield, especially if it's a large group. So we use video. And one of the ones when your question prompts is we do a program around the 1947 Brooklyn Dodgers. And, a lot of corporations do training around diversity and inclusion. We use this one to teach about diversity and inclusion, but also teach about leadership. 1947, there were 400 baseball players in the major leagues. None were black until Jackie Robinson comes along. So we use the story of Branch Rickey and Jackie Robinson and the Brooklyn Dodgers and how they integrated him to their team to teach about how a team can work more effectively when they do become more diverse. That one and the other one in the classroom that's very popular is the story of Sir Ernest Shackleton and the Antarctic adventurer. He went to the South Pole in 1914, went for a trip that was supposed to last 3 months. It lasted 684 days. And he returned to everybody alive, which was very rare. And it's a wonderful metaphor about leadership and building team unity. Those are done in the classroom and can have the same effect.
So if those are done in the classroom, when COVID happened, or if people are remote, are those some of the things you can offer for teams that are across the country to learn some things if they can't all get to Gettysburg or wherever it might be?
Absolutely. Zoom kept us alive during COVID, and we were able to do a number of things over Zoom. It's not the full effect of being there, but thank goodness for Hollywood because they can bring it alive through video. And we use a lot of videos to do that.
So jump into another topic. You love writing books.
I love telling stories.
So how many books you have and what are you writing about?
Yeah. So one of the things, just to give you an intro for that. So when I retired from Ernst Young, and again, I got out with my sanity, got out at a little bit early age. And retirement's not the right word because I knew there were many things I wanted to do post-career. And I never should have been an accountant. I became an accountant because I had a first-generation Italian immigrant father who said, you better get a job when you get out of college. I want to be a sports writer. I love sports. So when I got out of accounting, I said, hey, it's my chance. I'll write a book. So I've written 3 sports history books. My wife likes to say she's married to a worst-selling author. They're not, I'm not trying to make a name or anything, but they were stories that I felt needed to be told and needed to be preserved. I think, the sad thing is when stories die with people. And so I'll just mention the latest one. The latest book is called Voices of Meadowbrook Park. So if you're in Greenville and you go down to Unity Park, my hope was that people who go to Unity Park will understand the history of that area, not just from the Black community that was served down there, but the baseball history. And this is where it connected with me. So in the ground where Unity Park is was a ballpark called Meadowbrook Park from 1938 to 1942, built by a Baltimore businessman by the name of Joseph Cambria, an Italian immigrant. And this park, over that period of time, over 40 Major League Hall of Famers appeared in that park, many of them during the barnstorming years when they're traveling from spring training up north. Mickey Mantle, Ted Williams, 1939 Yankees, and Joe DiMaggio and Lou Gehrig played at Meadowbrook Park. So from a baseball perspective, that's kind of sacred ground. So that's a book about that, but it also captures some of the history of the community there in local Greenville history, which is special to me. So that's been fun. It's been a hobby.
So how could people find that book if they wanted to read it?
Yeah, so it is on Amazon, but I encourage people to just reach out on my publishing website, because if you know anything about Amazon, you know that they get most of what you keep. So it's called 37publishing.com, and it's where you can get all three of my books. They're all three local sports books, and shipping's free off of that too. So 37publishing.com.
What one other thing that I think maybe, because whether it's sports history or you're teaching them about leadership, what are your thoughts? Because obviously you know a lot about history, about the importance of history. You know, we were talking about, in fact, maybe I should give a background. I wanted to have my son here because he, as a young kid, loves history, and I think that's lost a lot of times on our younger generation. And I think he gets it because a lot of times we, how's the saying go? We're doomed to repeat it if we don't know it. So maybe what are your thoughts about why it's important that we know history and then we learn from it?
Yeah. Well, it's so encouraging to hear about your son. Anytime I hear that, quite frankly, my love of history didn't occur till a later age. I wish it had occurred sooner. But I think so much is lost when people don't understand the history for that very reason. We're doomed to repeat it. But just the lessons that can be learned from people who went before you. Think about it just from a business setting, and you think about the mentors and the relationships you've had that help you get to where you are from a business. What you're really talking about there is history. You're learning from somebody else's history. And so when we fail to acknowledge it, when we fail to study it, we're basically shortchanging ourselves from the ability to learn and to grow. So that's the primary reason. And then the other thing for me kind of goes back to inspiration. My ultimate hero in American history is Abraham Lincoln. If you go to my office in my home, there's a portrait of Lincoln behind my desk, because there are many times during the day I'm thinking, what would Lincoln do in this moment? And they're just, if you know his life and you know his story, certainly he wasn't perfect, but there's so many attributes of his leadership, the ability to communicate, the commitment he had to developing himself and the learning. Those things inspire me every day. And I think when we don't study history, we just miss out on that. Because I think people are looking for role models and looking for inspiration. And Lincoln said it best. He said, until a tree falls, you really can't measure it. And so, there are many great leaders today, but until you get to the end of their life and you let some time pass, you really can't validate the character and the integrity and the measure of their success. And so that's the power of history.
Awesome. Well, that's a lot of cool stuff you're doing and a lot of cool things that we all could learn from. And certainly I'm going to check out a little bit about what you're doing. And my son might want to take a look as well. And I know Anthony wanted to ask one more question about our signature question, or maybe more.
I had two more questions.
Oh, sure.
I know there's an event coming up.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to just...
Yeah, so the Greenville Drive on this Friday night are honoring the Greenville Black Spinners. So in a segregated society, like Greenville was up until, civil rights came about, baseball was an important part of the Black community. But unfortunately, it was a separate part of the community. You had white baseball and you had Black baseball. So the Black community, they had their team, the Greenville Black Spinners, a semi-professional team with many great athletes. Many athletes who had they been given the opportunity that their white counterparts had gotten, we might have been reading about them in the major leagues. So the Greenville Drive is going to honor them on Friday night at their game. I'll be there signing books. A number of the descendants from those Black Spinners will be there. There would be one, I think, that was actually played for the Black Spinners. So it's going to be a great night. The Drive are going to wear commemorative Black Spinner uniforms. So that's at the Drive Stadium, 7:05 first pitch, I think.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then the signature question that we ask everyone: what makes you tick?
Yeah. Well, for me, it can't escape my faith on that. I'm a Christ follower, and everything stems from that. And so, from a leadership perspective, just put it in context, the greatest leader ever was Jesus Christ. He took 12 ordinary men who were not the sharpest knives in the drawer, and he changed the course of history. How did he do that? Well, we could talk for hours. And so, for me, that's where I draw my inspiration. That's where I draw my fortune in life, my blessing in life, all comes from my relationship with Christ. And so that's where it comes from first and foremost. But then to carry that further, again, I have this passion around leadership, because whether it's a business, church, a family, a school, everything sort of rises and falls based on leadership. So in the time I have left here on earth, I hope I can make some investment in helping leaders get better at what they do. So that's what drives me every day.
Great stuff, man. I'm inspired just listening to you. So, and I don't, Good. With hearing that answer, I don't know the name of the book. I should know. I've read it. The Greatest Man That Ever Lived. It's on our reading list at work.
Og Mandino.
About, and then The Richest Man That Ever Lived, King Solomon. Mm-hmm. And so it uses some of these biblical stories about leadership. They're great. I don't know if you've.
There's also a book called Lead Like Jesus. And, and the other thing about that is, who was the best storyteller ever? It was Jesus Christ. Right. He started with parables.
Right.
And and so we stole it with battlefield leadership, the ability to connect with people with something that might be relevant to them through the power of story. So.
Great. Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here. And maybe for those that want to find out more about what you're doing on the battlefield, sure. Could you tell them how to reach out to you or find you?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're interested in getting involved with battlefield leadership, or perhaps you've got a group that would be interested in some leadership training, go to battlefieldleadership.com. It's battlefieldleadership.com. And you'll see our website and everything you need to know there, all our programs, all our facilitators. The information is there. And then if you want to just reach out to me personally, Mike.Chibbaro at battlefieldleadership.com.
Thanks again, Mike. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And for everyone out there, go out and find our website, our social media post on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and all the various social media platforms and podcast platforms. And until we see you next time, go out and make our community great.